Welcome to Ocean Stories, a podcast about the people doing incredible things in, on, and around our oceans. I'm your host, Lydia Carey, and I believe in the power of stories to save our seas. Hello, everybody. Thank you for joining for another episode of Ocean Stories. Have you ever seen those people on Instagram that take amazing photos and videos of underwater creatures, and you always wonder, how are they traveling the world? How did they get so good at taking these photos and videos? How are they paying for all of this? What is their job? If you are like me and you've always wanted to know more, then this episode is for you. Today we're joined by Kaush, a wildlife conservation biologist, award-winning photographer, and filmmaker from the UK. He has a passion for telling stories through his photos and videos, and he's traveled the world taking amazing content of all sorts of different animals, working with leading organizations like the BBC, among others. From studying whale sharks in the Maldives to capturing awe-inspiring images of nature, his work bridges the gap between conservation and media. In this episode, we talk with Kaush about his journey, his insights on wildlife photography, and how media can be a driving force for conservation. If you have any interest in this field, then this episode is for you. When it comes to the world of ocean conservation, there really is a place for everyone. And if you're a filmmaker, videographer, photographer, or other type of creative, it can be really fun to connect with people with more unique and creative career paths that are using their skills to raise awareness about endangered species, to educate people about the issues that are facing our oceans, and that are simply helping people connect with these incredible underwater animals through out-of-this-world content. So without further ado, let's get right into it.
Yeah.
Welcome, Kaush, to Ocean Stories. How are you
Thanks for having
today?
me. Yeah, I'm well, thanks. How are you?
Good. I have so many questions for you, and I'm really excited to just pick your brain and to learn more about your career. First, I'd like to know, where are you from?
So I'm originally from London, UK.
Okay. And so how did your connection to nature and wildlife and the ocean begin?
It's a little bit of like a different one because I'm from the suburbs, so I don't really have a lot of wildlife around me growing up, especially not the ocean. I was pretty far away from the water, but I always just had a love for nature and wildlife growing up. Animals were my favorite thing, and I kind of just pursued that as I got older and older. My parents would take me to like city farms and to zoos and things like that, or aquariums, because that's the closest thing we had to wildlife. And then it just grew from there as I got older.
Did you sort of always know that that's what you wanted to study and pursue?
Yeah, for sure. I knew I wanted to do something related to wildlife when I was older. I just didn't know exactly what that would be, but I knew I had to have animals involved.
So when it was time to come, I guess, pick a career, how did that go for you? Did you just go for it and you were like, this is it, I'm gonna study this. Boom.
Yeah, kind of. I mean, it was a little bit of umming and ahhing about what to go and do, but in the end, I knew it had to be something to do with wildlife, and that would give me kind of hands-on contact or as much field time with animals as possible. So I ended up doing a master's in wildlife conservation.
And now, what would you call yourself as like an official title, if you could
That's
give
a
yourself one?
hard one, to be honest. Yeah, I do a few different things. I go with wildlife conservation biologist and photographer filmmaker a lot of the time, but it depends on who I'm talking to or what mood I'm in.
Okay, so are you sort of freelance? You have different projects?
Yeah, these days I work mainly freelance, so I kind of work on personal projects and sometimes for brands and things like that. But most of the time, I work on personal projects that I want to. A lot of the time, it involves helping NGOs because that's kind of where I got started and what I'm really passionate about.
Super cool. Well, I know a lot of your videos and your content is ocean related. I know a lot of it isn't, but what I see is a lot of ocean stuff. What made you go down that road?
I guess it's from where I started, which is I did my master's thesis on an ocean-related topic, and it kind of snowballed from there. So it involved a lot of time in the water.
What was your thesis about?
My thesis was on whale shark ecotourism in the Maldives, so it meant spending a long time in the water with the sharks. So I was getting a lot of kind of reps in the water and practicing filmmaking and photography.
That is a really hot button topic right now.
Yeah, yeah. I
What
mean,
was the angle of your, this is tangential, but I want to know what you found out.
the long and short of it is whale sharks don't like it when people are too close or when they're trying to touch them. And if we aren't a little bit more careful in how we approach ecotourism around them, it's going to affect them a lot in the long term in terms of physiology and behavior wise as well. And the area where I was studying them is one of the few places in the world we see them year round, but this continued pressure on them is reducing the number of encounters every year. So the sharks are just leaving because they're just getting hammered by tourists, basically.
Well, that's interesting. And that's a topic that could be a whole podcast on its own. I'm curious about how you first started learning photography and videography and filmmaking.
I've always had a camera in my hand since I was young. Like I was the one at family events and things like that would snap pictures, film cameras, like back in the day, and then slowly getting into digital photography. So it was kind of always a hobby for me, but I never really studied it or knew the intricate details of it. When I went out to the Maldives for the first year to do my master's thesis, I took a little GoPro 4 with me just to document the encounters with people and whale sharks. And when we weren't seeing sharks, I'd just go and photograph things on the reef and free diving on the reef and things like that. The following year, I went back again as a research assistant for 3 months. So I was in the water every day for 3 months, just videoing and photographing things. And then everything else was self-taught, basically the school of YouTube to figure out how to do things. When it comes to underwater photography, it's important to be good in the water before you take a camera down there kind of thing. So whether it be scuba or free diving, it's really important to be good in the water, like know your surroundings and have good buoyancy, all that kind of thing. Because then when you add a camera to it, it adds a whole different level of thinking, and you've got to pay more attention to that. And then your buoyancy can go out the window, for example. So I always say it's really important to be good in the water first, but then you don't have to start off with those massive setups. Like I started with just the GoPro, and they do so well. Like they have their limitations, but they're really, really great. And they're less kind of, you don't have to think about them as much. It's a smaller thing, so you can just jump in the water and kind of have some fun, get creative with it, and just go from there, basically. You don't have to start with these massive setups.
When you are going to photograph these amazing, crazy species, how do you prepare for that? What is the process of your setup?
So it will start before I get into the field. It will start at home, kind of just doing maintenance on all the equipment. These days, when you're shooting on a bigger camera with housing, there's O-rings and a lot of maintenance to make sure that the housing stays waterproof, doesn't let any water in. And then when you're in the field, it's kind of figuring out what your subject is. That will determine what kind of lens you're using, a wide angle lens, macro lens, something in between. And then whether you need lights or not. If you're free diving, I'm not really going to put lights on because you're going to be fairly shallow. But then if it's a deeper dive, you're going to want lights. But then also some animals don't react well to light. So it takes a bit of understanding the subject as well as the conditions that you're going to be in.
Something that we always talk about, well, maybe we don't always talk about it, but I always talk about it, is how photos and videos and documentaries are so important when it comes to conservation and awareness and sort of just connecting people with animals that they would never see or would very rarely see. Creating like an appreciation in people for the animals. Have you seen that in your career?
Yeah, for sure. I think, especially when it comes to the underwater stuff, a lot of people aren't lucky enough or have the ability to get underwater at any point in their life and experience these things for themselves. So I think it's important for people like me that are lucky enough to be able to experience these things to share it with the wider public. Especially because there's so many, like there's so many incredible things that live in the water, and it's a completely different feeling being there as well compared to being on land. So it's just about trying to translate that through videos and pictures to people and getting them to be as passionate about it as I am.
Since you're in the water all the time, kind of, and I'm not, maybe one day, what do you see as some of the biggest issues in conservation?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, these days, all the kind of issues that face nature, most of them are man-made of origin for most of them. So, for example, in the oceans these days, ocean temperature rising and acidification is a massive problem. There's a massive bleaching event going on across the world this year with coral reefs across the world really suffering. Plastics are again a massive thing. Boats have recently become, not recently, but it's become in the public eye more. Lots of shipping boats and things like that in areas where there's high densities of wildlife. So recently, there's a really bad event in French Polynesia where a humpback whale was hit by a shipping container or a ferry and unfortunately died of its injuries. So things like that. There's so many things at the moment that are affecting oceans across the world. And unfortunately, a lot of them are human made in origin.
Yeah, I actually saw about that whale, and it was really sad because I saw that there was a petition attached, and in the text of the petition, it said, "This whale has such a fun loving personality and was so playful, and
Yeah.
everybody knew it, and it had like a name." And that really struck me. I was like, this is awful. It's like a child. Because it was a young whale, too, I think, right?
Yeah, I think so. And like you said, it was one that a lot of people have been in the water with, experienced like incredible encounters with, and things like that. So I think it just really hits home as well when people have spent so much time with an individual and you get to know its personality and something like this happens.
Totally. And the photos and the videos, I think it has a role to play in connecting people. If there was no photos and no videos of it being playful, then it would be hard for people to, it allows for more empathy and just connection in general.
Yeah, for sure. I think that's one of the major things, especially with an animal like as sentient as a whale. You can really feel it through pictures and images, just how incredible these connections are when people are in the water with them. And it just gets people back at home looking at them to connect with these animals more and feel that sense of empathy and want to protect them more.
Is the hardest part for you of your role, of your jobs and projects?
The hardest part might be, I mean, nature is nature at the end of the day. So sometimes you see things that aren't so nice, but it's just part of nature. So predatory scenarios, things like that. So it's not always nice, but at the end of the day, one of the animals has to feed. And you just have to remember that you can't interfere because it is nature, it's natural. So that maybe is one of the most difficult parts, yeah.
Have you ever been scared that you are the prey?
Not yet, but I try and be as careful as I can. For the most part, especially ocean animals are pretty forgiving with us being in their territory, and in their space. So there hasn't been a moment like that so far. On land, there can be like some animals aren't always as forgiving. There have been a couple of like sketchier situations maybe, but yeah, for the most part, underwater.
Which animal has the sketchy situation related to? I don't know why I want to guess it's like a rhino, but maybe not.
It wasn't a rhino, to be fair. It was a hyena, but I guess I wasn't wrong. It was a mutual kind of surprising each other kind of scenario. Neither of
Snuck
us
up
was
on each
expecting
other.
the other to be there, yeah. But it ended fine.
What are your favorite animals to capture? What's your number one favorite piece of content you've done, if you have one?
Ooh, that is difficult. I would say whales for sure. Have been my favorite subjects. There's just something
The
about them.
whale, the whale fluke
The
necklace
way,
really
yeah.
gives it away.
Literally, I wear it every single day. It's just I went a long time without ever seeing a whale, and then since that point, it's been like whales every year is what I've shot the most almost. Um, and there's just something so special about them. Like when you see them, the size of them, but then also just you can see the thought and like sentience behind their eyes and being in their presence. Like they know you're there, they kind of check you out, and the connection between you and them is just different to most other animals. Pretty much any other animal underwater, but most other animals in the world, it's very different. And yeah, I would just never get enough time with whales in the water.
It sounds so magical, but it also kind of scares me a little bit. When I was in Costa Rica last fall, actually, we saw, way in the distance, we saw what I think is a whale. I started flipping out. It's my favorite animal, right? And this podcast had just started, so I was like on whale patrol. Granted, I had had a few drinks. My eyes actually glazed over, and it was like seriously so far away. Later, we were swimming, and now I've since learned that maybe when you go swimming in super deep, like open ocean, you should be a little bit more aware of like what's around, and you should like have goggles. I've learned a lot more since then. But at the time, we just stopped the boat and just all hopped in the water, like, whoa, let's splash around, make a lot of commotion, and just sit in the ocean. And I actually, again, there was a few drinks in my system. I actually started getting really freaked out because the water was super beautiful and the setting was so beautiful, but I just like looked down. I'm like, dang, this is 300 feet deep. It's so deep that that whale could be somewhere near me. And it just started really scaring me. Even though I really want to see one, I was like, maybe I should get out. Like, maybe this is not the. And I'm a confident swimmer, but it's just, I don't know. Even now I'm getting like freaked out thinking about it because, yeah, I don't know. There's just something a little scary about it. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, the fear of the blue is kind of, it's fairly common, to be honest. A lot of people experience that, just being in the open ocean like that and then looking down into the abyss almost type of thing. For the most part, like, you're going to be absolutely fine, but it is that fear of the unknown, I think, that gets people sometimes.
Yeah, about 2 weeks after that, I was on TikTok doing research for this podcast, and I want to say her name is Shark Diver Kaylee or Shark Diver, a shark, some shark educator person
Yeah,
on TikTok was like the number one thing that you should not do when you're in the blue desert, which she said the blue desert is where the sharks are going to be, where there's not a lot of other things around, so they might be more looking for food and looking for a food source, is to just jump in
yeah,
without goggles, splash around, make a bunch of noise when there's nothing else around because you're going to sort of attract them. And I was like, okay, this is really helpful information.
yeah.
I
When you
wish I
said you
had
were in the
known.
blue splashing around, I thought, oh, it's a little bit, but you get out of the water quickly, it's fine.
Yeah, they continued swimming. I got out because, like I said, I was a little bit spooked. And I think on a foggy day too, it sort of makes everything feel more eerie. Then on a
Yeah,
sunny day, it's like, whoa, splish splash. But when it's foggy and like
yeah.
misty, it's really
Gives
super,
that eerie kind of
super.
vibe to
Yeah, yeah. Anyways,
it.
what advice would you give to somebody who admires what you're doing, sees you on social media, and they're like, I love wildlife conservation and I want to be a conservationist? Or they are like, I love photography and videography and I want to combine my loves of those two things.
I would say just get out and kind of start doing it. There's no kind of perfect time to be able to do it. Everyone has access to a camera, whether it be on your phone or a GoPro or something like that. You don't have to have top of the line equipment to get out and start shooting. And no matter where you are, pretty much for the most part, there's going to be some kind of conservation organization or NGO nearby that you can go and volunteer with, or just give some of your time to and get experience with. Um, and just start from there and grow and get better at what you're doing, kind of learn more. Like I said, I learned pretty much everything I know about editing and photography from YouTube. There's plenty of free material out there for people to learn from, and yeah, just get out and do it, practice.
How much of a role does editing and like color grading play in what you're doing? Like, how much does each step, how much time does it take?
uh, I would say compared to shooting, editing could be maybe double the time, if not more. A lot of it does go into editing. It kind of depends on your style of shooting as well. But especially for underwater stuff, with the color correction and color grading kind of thing, especially like my style of color grading, it takes a little bit more time. And so, yeah, you can sometimes go on a shoot for a week and you're spending 3, 4 weeks editing what you've got from it, depending on how much you shot, of course. But
Mm.
yeah, editing, especially for underwater stuff, I think plays a large part.
Yeah, I ask because it always seems like so glamorous. It just seems like you pop under, take a photo with a good camera, and come up, post it on Instagram, and now you have endless work opportunities and you're swimming all the time. And I know that that's how it seems on social media, but maybe in reality, I'm not sure if it's like that because that's not my job.
Yeah, I think it does look quite. I mean, I'm lucky. I don't complain about what I'm able, like I'm lucky enough to do. But yeah, there's a lot more that goes on behind the scenes. I try and share as much of it as possible, but like no one wants to see me sitting at the computer for days and on just looking at 1,001 photos that I've shot, or cutting a sequence together and just like going through it second by second, frame by frame. There is definitely a lot that goes behind the scenes, and sometimes you drive yourself mad just looking at a screen, but it's worth it. It's a nice balance because you get be in the field for quite a long time, and then you get back and do all the editing.
Yeah. I sometimes feel that way even about my own life. Like, I think sometimes people could look at, I mean, maybe I'm hyping myself up, but I think if you were to just think that my life is what I put on Instagram, people would think that I'm, always outside, I'm always traveling. And I sort of am always outside and always traveling, but like I'm also always on the computer and I'm always doing stuff on the computer. But that's not a really cute photo. That's not a bright, colorful photo for me to put on Instagram. It's me sitting on the computer for the prior 6 hours to before I went outside and went adventuring and stuff.
I would just urge people, anyone that's interested in wildlife or conservation, that kind of thing, just get out and do it. Help any NGO that's nearby you. And yeah, if you're interested in photography, filmmaking, get out and start doing it. There's no perfect time. You can wait forever to kind of wait for the perfect time, but I would just say get out, start doing it, and start creating. Tell the stories that you want to tell, because it's so important nowadays to be able to tell stories, especially when it comes to conservation and wildlife.
That's really beautiful. It's making me laugh because this summer I did try to go out with the GoPro and it became like my favorite thing. I'm laughing because the videos are horrendous. They're so shaky. I don't know if I had like the stabilizer setting off or if there even is a stabilization setting. I told you about my lack of being able to hold my breath. So the clips are quite amazing.
It happens. Everyone starts somewhere.
Baby steps.
Yeah,
baby
exactly,
steps.
exactly.
The point is that it was so fun, and like I think that's also
that's a
an
huge
important
part of it,
thing
having
too.
fun in the field and just you're lucky to be around nature and wildlife and just enjoying it. Not every shot has to be award winning. Sometimes it's just for memories and for you to look back on.
Exactly. That validates basically my entire camera roll of GoPro photos. Well, something that we ask every single guest on Ocean Stories is, what is your favorite ocean story or ocean memory?
That's difficult, but I think the one that stands out is being in the water with sperm whales. And I had an encounter with an adolescent sperm whale where we were just swimming alongside of it, and then it ended up coming directly towards me and kind of floating vertically in the water in front of me. And there's just this moment where it's not fully grown, but it's still quadruple the size of me, and it's kind of floating in front of me. I'm floating underwater, and we kind of make eye contact, and just like 20 seconds, 30 seconds of this crazy connection with this amazing animal. And it just sticks in my mind forever, basically. It was just, like I said, whales are special, and especially sperm whales, the largest predatory animals in the world, pretty much. Like, that is an encounter that just stays in my mind.
Well, thank you so much for coming on and chatting, talking about your experiences and what you do. It's been really interesting, and I hope that anybody listening, if they want to learn more about photography, that they can check you out, because I'll put all of your links to everything in the show notes. So yeah, thank you for your time.
Thank you for having me. It's been really great chatting with you.
Thanks for listening to another episode of Ocean Stories. Don't forget to follow our social media channels for extra content behind the scenes and to connect with our guests. If you like this episode, please leave a review and let us know what you think. See you soon for more Ocean Stories.